What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the 31 Days of Horror. I'm your host, Mood616, and thank you once again for stopping in. Yes, we are back for the 31 Days of Horror Volume 8. And yes, I got to start off by apologizing for not doing it last year. I know there was a lot of people that hit me up after and be like, why the fuck aren't you doing it? But I just had so much going on last year. I was out of town at the beginning of October, and I was actually out of town towards the end of it also, so it would have been really hard to kind of maneuver and get all the reviews in and stuff like that. But I'm back for Volume 8 this year. Very, very excited. I haven't actually done a review on this channel in front of the camera in a bit, so I'm looking forward to getting into this. I usually don't do a lot of themes or challenges for 31 days, but I thought this year I might put a little bit of rules, a little bit of stipulations in there that I wanted to meet that type of criteria. I generally always try to hit up at least like 10 different countries when I'm doing the 31 days. So this year's criteria for myself basically was to hit that again, get at least 10 different countries. I wanted to hit every decade from 1930 up to the present, which is the last 100 years basically, so that's the last 10 decades. And also have about 10 different subgenres, and also have a film from 2024. I didn't really count my subgenres out, so what I did, I've already pre-chose all 31 of my films, so I put the remaining 30 films, because day 31 is already bona fide. I'm going to do that. It's like a Halloween film. So I put the other 30 films in the randomizer, and I just hit random, and that's just the structure of the whole month. And this is the one that came up for today. So that's basically my rules and stuff. So one of the subgenres I picked was like a comedy horror type film, and it just happened to be this one that came up for today. It's not really the best movie to be starting off the 31 Days of Horror with, but it's still kind of a cool one. But yeah, so those are the rules and stuff like that. And yeah. So getting into day one here, from 1991, released by Severin's sub-label Intervision, and we've got Franky and His Pals. Yes. This is actually a film that I missed the first time they released it. They ended up re-releasing this thing about a year later, year and a half later, something like that. I picked it up on the Severin sale, I believe, last summer, and I still had never watched it. I was going to actually do it for the 31 Days of Horror last year. Of course, that never happened, so I just threw it into the mix in this year, and it turned out to be day one. So, yeah, pretty cool. But getting into the premise of Franky and His Pals, basically it follows, an interpretation of the Universal monsters. So we got Franky, we got Drac, we got Wolfie, Mummy, and Humper, which is like the humpback, or the humpback dude from like Frankenstein. And we've got another kind of character woven in there, and his name is Facius, or whatever. He's like this little dinosaur creature that's in the mummy's stomach. I can't even remember what his name is, but it's kind of an add-in, but it's just, it's just there for pure gold. But anyways, the premise of the film is basically about, well, the film starts out with these two guys. They're digging a grave. One guy turns at the other guy and he says, you know what? He goes, I'm going to tell you a story about these monsters that they got holed up in the mountains here, and they got all caved in and stuff. And he proceeds to tell this story about how these monsters, they were out in the mountains and stuff like that. And this avalanche basically trapped them inside this cave in this mountain. And of course, then it cuts to like all of our monsters are inside this cave and stuff. And of course, they have this this treasure map. And this is all taking place in California, in the French Gulch, which is actually a real gold town in California and stuff like that. So they've got this map to find this treasure. Anyways, one thing leads to another, and they find themselves breaking out of this cave. Anyways, they head down into the French Gulch, and they follow the map, which leads them to this hotel where they proceed to look for the gold. What they don't know, it's actually Halloween, so they just fit into the narrative perfectly. Everyone's like, oh, great costumes, great costumes. And of course, they proceed to look for this treasure and stuff, and then that leads to one thing after another, and that's our film. So, Franky and His Pals, yes, this is a film. It was obviously shot probably in the later 80s. It says 1990 release on here, but IMDb says 91, so it does look very, very 80s. It's actually a shot on video film. They have like a little bit of a warning at the beginning saying that, this is a shot on video film. It was actually sourced from one of the independent release VHS tapes, and it must have been like a brand new one that never got distributed or something like that. They must have had an extra one, because the transfer on this looks phenomenal for a shot on video film. There's no glitches. It doesn't have that like VCR tracking, and it doesn't have all the fucked up sides and shit. It looks really really good for a shot on video film, I gotta say. And you know, it's even shot and edited like a real film, so it has all that going for it. But at the core and the heart of this film, it's a comedy slash horror film. And I use the term lightly when I describe the horror of the film, because basically the horror comes from our iconic horror characters. It's more or less, it could almost be a kid's film in a sense. It's not really appropriate for kids because the jokes in the film are just a lot of dick and fart jokes and a lot of ass grabbing and just a lot of giggly type, you know, kind of teenage, you know, early 20 type humor and stuff like that. But it's fun though, man. It's really fun. I think the characters are hilarious in this film. Like they're just always doing the goofiest things. So basically when they get to this party, like they find themselves in this hotel and they find themselves at this Halloween party and they become kind of the stars and stuff. And it gets so sidetracked. Like they're there to find this gold, but then once they get into this party, it gets so sidetracked and they just find themselves trying to get booty, basically. You know, you got like all these characters that are out trying to find some booty, and you got a bunch of the characters like Humpy, he's grabbing asses every 2 minutes. Wolfie's getting hit on by gay guys, and he's out there dancing with this gay. Oh, it's so funny, it's ridiculous, it's just so stupid. But he gets sidetracked basically for like the whole movie until like the last 15 minutes. We're like, oh shit, where's the gold? And then you got this really weird kind of subplot with this mad scientist character who, like, right away I was like, man, that guy reminds me of Doc Brown. And he's like right in the beginning of the film, and which actually kind of comes into play too. I'm like, oh, he reminds me of Doc Brown, but you don't really know what he's doing, but he's actually building a time machine. I'm like, holy fuck, my mind was like totally blown. I'm like, that's so funny. But the weird part about the whole thing is Dracula's voice in this movie, he sounds completely like Doc Brown. Like right away, and it's just so weird that Drac sounds like Doc Brown, and we have this mad scientist in the film who's actually building a time machine. It's just such a weird, bizarre connection to me, but it had me laughing through the whole film. Literally every time Drac talked, I was like, that's Doc Brown. That's Christopher Lloyd. He's playing Christopher Lloyd playing Doc Brown. It was absolutely ridiculous, but I found myself laughing. Like the way they get out of the cave made me laugh. It's stupid, silly, just juvenile humor, but I really like that type of humor. It's pretty funny. But yeah, there's just a lot of nonsense. There's a lot of time filler in this film too. Like there's literally like montages and there's so much just nonsense that are happening and stuff, but I was entertained throughout the whole thing. It definitely shouldn't have been, in my opinion, 87 minutes long. You probably could have cut this thing down at least 20 minutes and tightened it up and made it a little bit better, to be honest. But overall, man, it's a really fun watch. I had a good time with this, and I can see why this sold out, because this was like a very sought out kind of like very underground, you know, indie film that like everyone had heard of but had like never seen. Like I remember reading about this film years and years ago, and when it sold out, when Seven first released, I was like, oh shit, man, people are actually really interested in that. That's awesome. And I was like, fuck, I missed out on it, because I pretty much have all the Intervision titles, so that kind of drove me nuts a little bit. And then they re-released it. I was like, oh, perfect. So I just happened to be on there grabbing some shit from the sale, which, you know, Severance sale, you gotta wait like 6 months for your order. So anyways, but yeah, Franky and his pals, man, it's a fun movie. Based on my shot on video scale, I'm going to give this one about a 6.5 out of 10. It does have some laughs. It brings some fun. The ending's ridiculous. The very last line in the movie is like completely outrageous too, because there is no sequel. Not really a spoiler, but it's a line that's used and stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's not really much to report on the horror angles of this and stuff, but I had relatively had a good time with this. You know, it's like a more perverted version of like the Monster Squad. You know, it's kind of, I'm assuming they took a little bit of inspiration from that, because the Monster Squad is kind of one of those kids horror films that you know, it was directed more towards kids, but we consider it to be a horror film because it has those universal characters and stuff, but it's really light on the horror. It's kind of like this, shot on video, a little bit more goofy, not as good, but you know, it's got some fun moments in it and stuff. But yeah, the little creature, yeah, Apophis, I think that's what his name is. Apophis, he comes out of the mummy's stomach. I don't know where this comes from, but there's a lot of jokes that he keeps spitting on the mummy, how he doesn't have a penis. It's ridiculous, man. There's a lot of penis jokes in this movie, and a lot of ass grabbing, a lot of booby grabbing and shit. Oh man, there's even a full-blown like bikini contest, and the winner is probably not the person you think is gonna win, but that's part of the joke, I guess. It's kind of mean, actually. It's kind of mean-spirited a little bit, but it's pretty funny. But I had a lot of fun with this. So, Franky and his pals. But yes, that's going to conclude day one here. And I did keep it pretty damn short. And I find myself just rambling, especially on day one. But yeah, so those are the premise, or the rules that I set up for myself. And I actually. So when I was picking out my films, I ended up with like 15 different countries, which is kind of cool. So you guys are going to get a fair amount of like foreign films and from different countries and things like that. And I didn't really count out my subgenres, but I'm sure I covered at least 10. If I didn't, well, boo-hoo. I do have a 24 film coming that I'm looking forward to watching and stuff. But yeah, most of the watches for this month I have not seen before. I think I did a lot of first-time watches, so that's going to be interesting. Also, there might be one or two that I've seen before. I can't quite remember. But I do recommend this. Franky and his pal. I think it's still available on the Severin site, so yeah, but this menu is annoying because it keeps like resetting itself, but I feel like it's going to give people like seizures or something like that. But anyways, guys, I'll be back with day two, and I'm actually really looking forward to watching tomorrow's film because it's by a director that I really do love. He's actually one of my most favorite modern directors. He's a foreign director, and he's done a lot of films I've like praised over the years, and I know you guys have heard of some of the movies and stuff like that, so I'll get into that tomorrow. And yeah, as usual, man, I'll check you guys in day two.